And then let us know when those are hot, J-Dubs. All right, guys, we're going to get rocking and rolling here in a matter of moments on the show. The mics are hot. Technically, the show is not started. We encourage the viewers and listeners to like and share the show. Join us in the discussion. Take a look on the screen for the headlines we're going to cover today. Brian Weimer's in the house. We're going to spend half an hour with Brian Weimer, a guy who knows this community inside and out, a guy who's seen the evolution of Charlottesville and the Charlottesville metro area for the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think there's been a lot of great with its evolution. As someone who's been here since 2000, I arrived as a mischievous first year at the University of Virginia, now a father of two, husband of one, and I've seen this community change rapidly for the good and for the bad and some for the ugly. We'll talk about that with Brian, get his take, the state of the union of Charlottesville. We'll talk Ix Art Park with Brian. We'll talk downtown mall with Brian. We'll talk housing with Brian. We'll talk the economy with Brian, the role of UVA with Brian. We'll talk the gentrification with Brian of Charlottesville. Folks, the F&B sector, the frontline workers in our community are very quickly being pushed, as we all know, outside of this community. And they have this very difficult question in front of them. Do I justify driving 45 minutes from Fluvanna, Waynesboro, or Buckingham for a $15 or $20 an hour job when I'm commuting 45 minutes one way and 45 minutes home? Because the cost of housing is so expensive. We can go a lot of directions with that one, Brian. Judah, let us know when LinkedIn is live. We've got viewers and listeners who want to see us live on LinkedIn. We are live on YouTube, live on 15 Facebook pages, live across Twitter, wherever you get your podcasting content. A lot we're going to cover on today's program. We are live on my personal Facebook page. Judah, I can confirm that. Judah's got some good commentary to offer today as well. There's a lot that did not make the rundown. So prepare yourself, guys. Sit back, enjoy the show. J-Dubs, which headline do you find most intriguing before we start the program, as we see a local newspaper, a local TV station, and a local radio group watching us on the program, Judah?
LinkedIn's good. Let's see. I think it's great. The Feast is expanding.
Feast expanding to the grounds of the University of Virginia.
Groovy.
Announced today. Love Feast. Breaking some news here. Also, Grit Coffee is leaving its York Place location for the old Waterbird Spirit location on Water Street. Interesting move by the Grit Coffee folks. We'll talk about that on today's program. We can rock and roll. Judah B. Wickhauer, when you are ready, sir.
Quiet on the set.
Good Thursday afternoon, guys. I'm Jerry Miller. Thank you kindly for joining us on the I Live Seville show. We are live in our studio in downtown Charlottesville, half a block off the downtown mall, a block off the downtown mall, less than 2 miles from the University of Virginia's Scott Stadium and the John Paul Jones Arena, 100 yards from the Charlottesville Police Department, a block removed from the courthouses, smack dab in the epicenter of a 300,000 person market that we love. A market that we've seen change rapidly in the 24 years that we have been a part of it. I came to Charlottesville as a first year at the University of Virginia, as you guys know, in the end of summer of 2000. Wide-eyed, looking for trouble and mischief, not focused on school in the least, instead looking to figure out what life was about, what Charlottesville was about. Loved music, loved sports, loved girls, loved partying. And here I find myself as a 40-something that's a father of two, a husband of one, and trying to do my little part to make the community a little bit better every single day. That's what we try to do with this program. We have a lot we want to cover on the show. We have more details on the 6-year-old who brought the loaded gun to Orange County Elementary. As a father of a 6-year-old, I find it terrifying that other 6-year-olds are bringing loaded handguns in backpacks to schools. One parent is speaking out, and we will relay her commentary to you, the viewer and listener. We have law enforcement in Spotsylvania who has now arrested 7 middle school or high school students for calling in BS threats, school violence threats. And this law enforcement chief, Major Troy Skibo, has said, guys, we're not going to mess around anymore with this. It's costing taxpayers a lot of money for us to respond to these threats. We're going to lock the kids up. We talked about this yesterday. We put it in comparison with the Florida police chief, who's not only locking up the folks that are calling the threats in, but he has doxed an 11-year-old who made a school violence threat on social media with name and image. Have we gotten to that point yet? We have a lot we're going to cover on today's program, including Feast Market, opening a new location, the Purple Building on Main Street. Feast is fantastic. It's got its second round of owners, the team behind Mary Mill Farm, the current owners of Feast. They're opening a second spot on the grounds of the University of Virginia. That's breaking news. We'll give you those details. How about Grit Coffee, moving from the downtown mall in York Place, where they have, I think, a pretty sweet spot. I mean, outside seating, that side of the mall's, frankly, the best side from a foot traffic standpoint, very close to the Code Building. Grit Coffee is choosing to leave York Place and head to the old Waterbird Spirits. We'll talk about that on today's show. One piece of news that did not make the headline is the Darden School is getting even more accolades. Bloomberg Business Week ranks UVA's Darden in the top 5 and the #1 business school from a public standpoint for 2 years running. This is important because the students that are learning at UVA undergrad or in a graduate capacity, a percentage of those are trying to return to Charlottesville with their major metro salaries, which is rapidly gentrifying our community in this work-from-home hybrid environment. So Darden, props to Darden, #5 MBA program in the United States by Bloomberg Business Week, and #1 from a public standpoint. The best of the best are truly matriculating through the University of Virginia's undergraduate and graduate programs. We'll give some props to Mexicali Restaurant. Roger Voisinay is excited for Brian Weimer. He's watching the program right now. Multiple media outlets watching us on the I Love Seville show. Mexicali, Judah, if we can get some photos on screen, in the old World of Beer location. 50 parking spaces in that building. The Flats, Corn Capshaw developed that building, sold that building, made a pretty penny. Now owned by a PE firm that's out of market. Mexicali, River Hawkins, Johnny Ornalis. They got cigars and whiskey coming up on Wednesday night. 2 of my favorite vices, cigars and whiskey. I would imagine our guest enjoys some whiskey and some cigars from time to time. We'll ask him about that in about 15 minutes. Judah Wickhauer will give props to Pro Renata as well. That brewery is employing more than 100 people. They spent nearly $1 million on the Skipping Rock beer making equipment. They secured the brewmaster from Basic City in Waynesboro, brought him to Pro Renata, and now they're doing real estate development in downtown Stanton as they expand their brand to Stanton. They have 3 points of sale. I mean, good night. These guys are crushing it. John Shabe, from dentist to beer baron, the man behind Pro Renata. Judah Wickhauer, if we can go to, I love to welcome you on a 2-shot. We talked Darden. We talked Mexicali and Pro Renata. We will talk Feast opening a new spot on grounds. We will talk Grit moving to Water Street. But I think the lead of today's show, before Brian, maybe the tallest guest we've ever had on this show, especially when he's wearing his boots. Dave Norris might be in contention from a height standpoint with Brian. But before we welcome Brian to the show, how about Mike Pruitt on Twitter, the newly minted Scottsville District Supervisor, Albemarle County Board of Supervisor in the Scottsville District. He goes on Twitter and frankly gets a little ballsy, right? He gets a little ballsy. Mike Pruitt, if we want to put a screenshot of what he posted on Twitter mere 3 or 4 hours ago. He calls the firm that purchased Cavalier Crossing in the Fry Springs neighborhood, right over the city line in the urban ring in Albemarle County. It's a firm called Bonaventure from Northern Virginia. They spent $20,500,000 earlier this year, a couple of months ago, to buy Cavalier Crossing. And Cavalier Crossing plays an important role in our community. They are an apartment complex that rents rooms individually. So it's not an apartment in totality. Although you can rent the apartment in totality, you can also rent rooms individually. Those rooms on average about $500 to $550 per month. Cav Crossing has been sold. An out-of-market buyer purchased it, $20,500,000 deal. And now this out-of-market buyer is not renewing the leases for the tenants paying the $500 a month in rent, and is instead saying, we're giving you notice, we're not giving you renewal, we're going to put the proverbial lipstick on the pig here, improve the amenities, put some stainless appliances, maybe some improved cabinetry in the kitchens, and then we're going to 4x the rents and look to get a return on our investment. Now, everything that's happened to Cavalier Crossing has been above board. This is the free market. I have been told that the previous owners of Cavalier Crossing asked many potential buyers locally if they were interested in purchasing this apartment complex. And all of them passed, and that's how it turned into an out-of-market buyer buying Cavalier Crossing. The out-of-market buyer, in fact, sold a stake in another position to do a 1031 exchange to buy Cavalier Crossing. I asked this question multiple times on this show: did Albemarle County err in not purchasing Cavalier Crossing? Albemarle County, the government, has a goal of creating housing affordability. Seems to me saving the housing situations for actual residents in Albemarle County fits that goal of housing affordability. Why not make a push Albemarle County their own to buy this when they're trying to develop housing from the ground up, which is way more expensive? That's a topic for another day, which we've covered on the I Love CVille show. Judah Wickhauer, did you put Pruitt's Twitter thread on screen, my friend?
Just about.
Okay, I'll read it to these guys, the viewers and listeners. People live stream the show, they watch the show. Supervisor Mike Pruitt says this, and I quote, and give me a thumbs up when it's on screen. Vulture capitalist private equity firm Bonaventure has been unjustly, it's on screen, guys, look at the screen, Mike Pruitt, I'll start again. Vulture capitalist private equity firm Bonaventure has been unjustly putting Cavalier Crossing residents on the street. Tenant organizers told me security deposit aid was the most critical need to help these residents. Last night, the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors, Pruitt tweets, approved $170,000 in emergency relief. He calls them vulture capitalists instead of venture capitalists, the private equity firm. Neil Williamson, the president of the Free Enterprise Forum, is Neil watching today? He often does. Responds to Mike Pruitt and says, vulture capitalist seems unjustly, what's he say? Neil Williamson?
Let me see.
Property owners, even those you may not like, have rights as well. Neil Williamson trying to stand up for property rights. I'm not saying he's going to bat for Bonaventure over there.
Right.
So I ask you, the viewer and listener, this question. A, was Mike Pruitt in line or out of line? On point or out of this world? Calling Bonaventure vultures. Great question, and a good point of content for this talk show. Judah Wickhauer, you want to chime in with some commentary before I offer my commentary? Jack of all trades, J-Dubs, the show is yours.
I think he was being a bit inflammatory, and certainly by calling them vultures. I don't know that he's got a point, but the way he goes about saying it, I think, could use some toning down.
Here's my take on this. Did anything Bonaventure do, was it shady, sketchy, illegal, or out of bounds? The answer, absolutely not. You can buy real estate if you can afford real estate. That's what they did. Is Cavalier Crossing an important aspect of our community? Hell yeah, guys. And is Bonaventure in tune with the needs of Albemarle County and Charlottesville? Probably not. They're from Northern Virginia. Do we have a dramatic hole in the affordable housing category in our community? Absolutely. Is what Bonaventure did in poor taste? It can be construed that way. They are putting folks that are on the financial margin out of housing. And many have said that live in Cavalier Crossing that this was their last resort before homelessness. So the poor taste certainly is there. I think the storyline that is missing is Albemarle County's misstep or mistake with not purchasing this apartment complex. Our government, whether it's Charlottesville, whether it's Albemarle County, is committed to creating housing affordability. Every politician in our area is running on a platform in some capacity tied to housing affordability. Creating housing affordability is no easy task. In Albemarle County and Charlottesville City are trying to do it from the ground up, building it, whether it's shelters for the houseless that may come in Belmont, whether it's helping the Salvation Army further develop their footprint over on Avon, whether it's Albemarle County building from the ground up, actually developing things down 5th Street Extended, Avon Extended with Southwood, with that project. Those projects are great, and I'm not throwing shade on them. What I do want to highlight is you have an opportunity in Cavalier Crossing to save a lot of people from potentially homelessness. Why did the county not look into dipping into its coffers and purchase Albemarle County Cavalier Crossing on its own? It could have done that. It's allocating millions of dollars, and there are 144 3- and 4-bedroom apartments in this complex, 520 total beds. The county could have purchased this and kept 520 plus people potentially off the streets. Now what they're doing is they're scrambling to offer deposit aid, security deposit aid for these folks that are looking for additional housing. It's no secret that getting an apartment's expensive. First month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit. The county's helping transition these folks into new housing. And frankly speaking, it really does not exist. Outside of Eagles Landing, finding a $500 a month rent scenario does not exist in Albemarle County. And one other thing on this topic, the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County could have done a joint venture if the $20.5 billion was too much for Albemarle. The city of Charlottesville is buying Wendell Wood, his dirt, has purchased Wendell Wood's dirt on High Street by the Rivanna River. It's turned it into a park. It created the bridge loan for Piedmont Housing Alliance and Habitat to buy the Carlton Mobile Home Park. Was that $8.7 million, a bridge loan?
Yeah.
Okay? It's clearly getting in the city the development game, or preventing development in Wendell's case with the park, Bo Carrington's case with the Rivanna High Street development. My point is this. The city and the county could have done some kind of JV joint venture and purchased this apartment complex as opposed to developing it from scratch. That's called smart business. The Mike Pruitt take, was it in poor taste? Was it out of bounds? Was it inflammatory, as Judah said? Perhaps. But I think Pruitt is utilizing a shock jock commentary to try to get attention for what he really believes, and that's the folks that are on the financial margin are getting such little resource in this community. One other storyline before Brian Weimer's on the program. I'm going to spend 4 minutes on this. If you can rotate the lower third for us on screen. Neil Williamson says, for what it's worth, Albemarle Supervisor Pruitt used the same language in yesterday's Board of Supervisors meeting. I'll say this. Thank you for that comment, Neil Williamson. I will say this. Mike Pruitt's tweet calling Bonaventure vulture capitalists, that was seen by a hell of a lot more people on Twitter and on social media than was heard or seen while he was sitting on the dais during an actual Board of Supervisors meeting. And that's an unfortunate state of affairs for government today. But people read and see social media. Many could care a rat's ass about what happens on a dais during a meeting on the record. That's why Pruitt's tweet is going viral right now. This Orange County story is a scary one. One of the mothers of students at Orange County Elementary has gone on the record, and she straight up has said, we did not know about the loaded gun until hours after the gun was found. She is a mother of a 6- and 7-year-old at Orange County Elementary School. She said that the superintendent did not notify parents immediately that a loaded gun was in the backpack of a 6-year-old at the elementary school. And she said, shame on Orange County Public Schools for not regarding the safety of all the students. In fact, she heard about this from a friend before she was notified by the school system itself. As a parent, I think it's the immediate responsibility of educators and administrators to notify other parents, all parents, if there's any kind of vulnerability or safety breach at any school. And to wait hours before notifying the parents is a point of concern. And I see why this mom is speaking on the record. Her name, Tiffany Eiler. I respect her courage to speak up, and I'm extremely nervous about the state of education today, where there are hoaxes and bomb threats and threats posted on social media, it seems like every day. Thank goodness the actual violence is not happening. Still, it's a point of concern. And I appreciate any mom or dad that's willing to say, hey, this needs to change. And for the law enforcement that are arresting, and for the prosecution and the Commonwealth's attorneys that are pursuing the fullest extent of the law with these kids that are calling in these hoaxes, I give them props. We talked yesterday about the Florida sheriff who doxed an 11-year-old who called in a hoax. A lot of people torn on that, but that could be the future of what we're going to see, because the way students and kids seem to learn a lesson in 2024 is by looking bad on social media. That's what scares them. Maybe it's not the law itself. Judah Wickhauer, any commentary you want to offer on this before we welcome Brian to the program?
Yeah, I found the lack of facts in this a little bit, I don't know, troubling. I understand where she's coming from, but she says she learned from a friend. We don't know how the friend learned. Maybe the friend was at the school. And I don't necessarily think that I understand the importance to parents of hearing about this immediately, but I think that's part of how, this doesn't just change our kids, it changes us. And we expect information right away. And at the point when a gun had been recovered from a child and nobody was hurt, I don't think alarming parents at that point really does anything for anyone except assuage some troubled feelings.
We'll agree to disagree on that one. As a parent, I'd want to know right away that there is a loaded gun in my kid's classroom. Right away, I would want to know. And every minute that goes by, as a parent, I would say, what are you doing with the protection of our kids?
But at that point, the gun would have already been...
It was in the hands of authorities.
Yeah.
And as soon as it was found and in the hands of authorities, parents should have been notified. The Orange County superintendent on Monday evening realized a mistake was made, and they sent out an apology through email and posted on social media saying, we made a mistake on how we handled this. And then, interestingly, the Orange County superintendent deleted the post on the Orange County Public Schools social media channels. I would bet you that post was deleted because someone, probably the attorney of Orange County, said, what are you doing?
Don't admit guilt.
Why are you exposing us in any legal capacity? Delete this right away.
And not only was he right from a law perspective, I think he was also right from a how school should respond to these things perspective. Because I don't think the first
This was Monday night. This was not first. This was well after it happened. The gun was found at lunchtime.
I know that. But the argument that the school should, at very first thing after something like this happens, is get on social media or email, is, I think, I think it's a misappropriation of expectations.
We'll appreciate that take. We'll agree to disagree on that one. And I'm curious to see what parents say. I'd love to go to the studio camera. Welcome Brian to the program. We had some topics that we need to get to. Brian, you are on camera. I'll cut to the chase. I think just about everybody knows Brian Weimer. Brian Weimer is a known commodity. Maybe not everyone, because you've been traveling. Why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself to all the viewers and listeners and the media outlets that are watching the show?
My name's Brian Weimer. I moved to Charlottesville about 23 years ago. Came from New York City. I used to work in advertising. And I decided I didn't want to work for products I didn't believe in. I was a very successful copywriter, creative director, and I wanted to give back. I wanted to work for the good guys. Actually, the first gig I got here was Mona Lisa Pasta.
Nice. Love that place.
I worked for Pasta. It was the greatest paycheck to come in and get ravioli. And I've followed them throughout the years. And seeing, and like being here, seeing all the mom and pops, seeing some of them go, see it go from how many drugstores that were mom and pops, how many hardware stores. I still go to Martin Hardware because they're the only like mom and pop hardware store I can think of left. But to see some of the fabric here somewhat disappear and other fabric gets created. I got involved in different projects. The Art Park was one. I'm a filmmaker. I've done various films. I documented the Claw women's arm wrestling. I documented when the neo-Nazis came to town. And a lot of my history ends up on film. Being in my household, you always were on camera, unfortunately. But I got to see this town grow and change, and I got involved in the Belmont Bridge sort of fiasco. I'm not sure how to characterize it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
It was interesting for me, though, coming from New York City, where you don't feel like you can really make too much of a change. Coming to Charlottesville, actually, I like that a certain amount of effort, I call it future bending, that you create a different outcome through your efforts. People say, well, I vote, what you vote every day, all of your choices. So sort of that, what wolf are you feeding? And for me, it was to put my energy and my capital into values. And some of those values are trust. Some of those values are gratitude. And actually, in speaking about the guns in schools, the vulture capitalists, I'm working on a project now, actually, that's about collaboration versus competition. I used to play competitive sports. I played college football and lacrosse. And that bred me very much to go into New York. You're going to be competitive.
Alpha dog.
What's that?
Alpha dog.
Yeah, but we are. This is a country based on independence. That's one of our biggest things. The 4th of July, Independence Day. It's very, there are a lot of countries have Independence Days, but here this is like what's closest to our heart. And I think it's somewhat detrimental because the independent notion can be at odds with the community notion. And that's where collaboration versus competition comes in. If there's only going to be one winner, I actually, for a brief moment, helped start a company that made games for kids called the Infinite Game Company, because a lot of games for kids have one winner. It's Monopoly. You own the board. It's Risk. It's World Domination. It's Life, which is a terrible name for a game because it's all about how to retire with the most money. Is that really what life is? I don't think so. So being here, raising a family here, gave me an opportunity to look at different priorities, how you interact within your own social community, which is your family, and your greater social community. Belmont has been such a wonderful neighborhood for me.
He's got a Belmont shirt on. He loves Belmont.
Yeah.
He's seen many faces of Belmont.
Oh, yeah. It definitely changed over the years. But even talking about the Belmont Bridge and connectivity, is a bridge a thing that connects, or is it what divides? And actually, that's what my teaching was let's step back and look at all of the reasons why we do things and get to an essential truth that we can agree on. Trust, gratitude, collaboration, and then some of these other issues that are sort of symptoms of somewhat of a diseased culture: guns in schools, vulture capitalists. Actually, I just finished a project on homelessness in America, and the attitude toward affordable housing has to change in this country. But again, you would say, I guess this was an out-of-town company that came and bought this. So they aren't part of the community, so they don't realize what affordable housing means to those individuals, means to that community, and what are the repercussions of when you put people out of their homes.
Yep.
Where do they end up? What does it mean to them? For some people, it's a paycheck. For another group of people, it's their life. Where are they going to go now? What are the choices? And we are not in a country of scarcity. Check this out. If you took the base wealth, just the wealth, the inherent wealth in this country, what's in houses and bank accounts, and you split it evenly across every household in America, every household would have close to $1 million. What does that mean? You get to go on luxury vacations, you get to send your kid to college, you get to have whatever health care you need. $1 million. All of a sudden, crime changes. All of a sudden, all these other things. Now, this is never going to happen. No. I'm not going to go redistribute the wealth.
No.
But just as a thought exercise, it's to say, we do not live in a scarcity. Therefore, why are some people taking more for themselves and not realizing the impact that it has on them when somebody else has less or has nothing? And then you get this divide. You lose the middle class. And there were things like the X-Art Park, which were an attempt to, we're not going to fix everything. It's an art park. It was like the remnants of a factory. There was a linen factory over at the X property. And there were other businesses that were in there, but it was waiting for like a kick. And there were a lot of different things, and the art park was one of them.
Before the art park was manifested, X was a place you did not go.
It was.
It had a shady feel to it.
Yeah. And it was empty in some parts. There was some restaurants, but it was struggling, definitely. Yeah. And that story began to change, and there were a lot of other impacts. Real estate is changing, gentrification is definitely happening.
Yeah.
But how can we do this creatively? How can we do it collaboratively? How can we do it increasing access? And I think the farmers market is actually one of the things.
I think the farmers market is brilliant. We're there Saturday morning with our two boys almost every Saturday. Right. I got so much I want to cover with you. Okay. This guy knows his community inside and out. Let's talk with Belmont. He's got Belmont on his shirt. This guy, in a lot of ways, the mayor of Belmont, helped when you were there, if memory serves correct, because you've come on the show in the past, the painted sundials. You were a part of that, right?
Yeah, actually.
Talk us. Yeah. Where was the intersection for the painted sundials?
There were two of them. Right. One was down Hinton, just at that intersection, but there's another one on Belmont Avenue that we painted over and over, and that was like a block from where my house was.
So this guy knows Belmont inside and out. I lived off Little Grays for almost 2 years, and I watched on Little Grays, which is the road right behind where Spud Nuts was, now it's Quality Pie, go from a working class neighborhood where it was good old boys and good old gals that were clearly paycheck to paycheck living. And then in 2005, 2006, when I was living there, 2007, I started seeing homes come in either torn down or gutted and built in 3-story fashion, like cottages that were 800 square foot, tiny homes converted into 800 square feet on 800 square feet on 800 square feet, made completely brand new. Saw the gentrification firsthand. I'd love for you to tell, you're a great storyteller. I would love for you to put in perspective the changes you've seen with Belmont in story fashion or in firsthand perspective fashion.
When we first came, it was pretty rough.
What year was that?
2001.
This was your family, right?
Yeah.
With kids?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, there were. We lived near Fitzgerald Tire, and just down the street, there were like young kids like selling drugs at 3 a.m, and like it was weird. I had just come from New York, and there were things that I'd seen in Belmont that I'd never seen in New York.
Like what?
I remember once I came out of my house, I had a hedge, and there was this bleeding man on my sidewalk, just lying there. I just like looked down, and he looked up at me, and he said, "Buddy, can I get a ride?" I was like, I didn't know like what to, the environment was weird. People were rolling bowling balls down Hinton, like, and just hitting cars and whatever. They were doing, I think there was drag racing down in the Hogwaller, and it actually, though, it was more of an outdoor culture, more of a porch culture than it is now. And that's one of the things that's great about Belmont is its porches. I used to live on Graves as well, and the narrowness of the street the closeness of the houses is you're looking right across and waving at a neighbor, and there's a guy playing a banjo over there. And it had a proximity that was more of a neighborhood. Now housing developments don't even have porches. You go right into your garage, so God forbid you see somebody, that you don't have to interact with your neighbors.
Did you guys feel safe with your kids when you first moved?
I felt safe. I saw some weird stuff outside of like Clark, like dudes drinking and like partying, whatever, like right in the street in front of the school. But my kids walked to school. They walked to Clark. I think that the neighborhood had a fabric, definitely. Gibson's grocery store, all sorts of there were institutions there that you could rely on, that people knew each other. And there were people who just stayed on their porch all day, who you could wave at. Actually, I remember there was one guy, he's like some old guy, and he'd do little ornaments and things, and there was a robbery somewhere, and when the police came, he was like, "Yep, he went that way." So you have a built-in system. I remember there was a story actually along 6th Street when one of those sort of bodegas went out of business. And there used to be some drunk guys who would hang out in the parking lot, but they were the neighborhood security system because they were the eyes and ears. So where are the eyes and ears now? Do people stay inside or do they go outside? And I think Belmont, with its block parties, with its Porchella, that still has institutions that make it. I don't know of too many other neighborhoods in Charlottesville that have that kind of identity that says oh, I live in Greenbrier, or I live in wherever. Actually, Fry Springs probably comes close. But Belmont has this feel.
Personality.
Yeah. And I remember when Mr. Gibson of Gibson's Grocery passed away, and I went to the funeral for it. And here was a guy whose life's work was that grocery store.
That's right.
And his son took it over and ran it for a while. And
then it became Keeble and Keeble Kitchen.
Yeah, right.
And now a film studio.
Right. So it's these institutions, but it was the learning that this guy's life's work was that corner grocery store, and everybody knew him.
Kevin Higgins giving you props. Brian, is there a period in Charlottesville's past you hope us to return to, or Charlottesville in the future you envision the city to be? And that's kind of what I want to do here with Brian. Kevin's watching in Greenwood, Virginia. I'll throw this to you. In fact, how about that question for you? A period in Charlottesville's past you hope us to return to?
I don't think we can return to anything. I think that there were periods of possibility. And one of them does relate to housing costs. Now that it's hard to find a place to stay, and now they're disappearing out in the county, where are the young artists, the young people who are full of that kind of possibility going to go to? And I got to be part of some of that. I was friends with Jen Tidwells and Zat McConnells, who are artists and dancers and doing really interesting...
Dude, you live right... I remember you were right in the middle of that.
Yeah,
you were right in the middle of that.
Yeah, and I don't know if that little heyday is going to happen again, because that was the Random Row books. There were places and institutions, I think... there is a place over in Carlton that's doing something interesting now, Visible Records. But where can somebody affordably do something interesting and weird? And Waynesboro might be the place now, frankly. Ix is having challenges right now with all the sort of market forces to remain sustainable, but some of it requires that freedom of possibility when you're not worried about your paycheck and whatever, and you can consider more imaginative alternatives. And that's where it gets interesting for me. That's where the possibility, and it was things like we were talking about Feast. So when the Market Street or Main Street Market sort of changed over, that was also a time of some of the developers who did interesting things. And the developer there didn't just say, well, let's just bulldoze this thing and we'll build a giant, supermarket.
You're going to talk Gabe Silverman here?
Gabe Silverman.
The late, great
Yeah.
Gabe Silverman. Gabe Silverman, I'll offer some perspective. So Alan Kajin listens to and watches this show. Alan Kajin is the bi-coastal attorney that owns much of Charlottesville City. He owns, for instance, Rapture. He owns much of West Main Street. He owns Public. He owns where Shenanigans is, the shopping center behind Shenanigans. He owns the Main Street Market, the purple building where Orzo is. And Alan, who, he is focused on the bottom line. I think that's safe to say. I think he would agree with that. He had a partner who's passed away, Gabe Silverman, who was an architect. I met Gabe when I was like 24, 25, right over there where 216 used to be, at an office behind 216 on Market Street across from the police department. I needed some office space. I go into his office. He is looking at some architectural plans, has a cigarette dangling from his lips, and he said, "What do you need?" I go, "I need rent. I don't have much. I need an office. I don't have much to pay." And he said, "I'll find you something." Offered us something for like $475 a month. It was freaking amazing. And he was Alan Kajin's, in a lot of ways, eyes on the street. Is that how you would describe it?
Well, I think he was many things, and he was many things to this community.
Yeah. Charlottesville conscious?
He was a form of consciousness and conscience.
Yeah.
And to me, it was a foresight. And it wasn't just looking strictly at a bottom line, although I think that he had that capacity too, but the room for possibility and the trust in individuals and what they may be doing. And I don't know, I think there were a lot of institutions here owe their existence, and there's a lot of gratitude to all those people involved in that we wouldn't be where we are today. Live arts. There are like so many institutions that got their start through these individuals who were property owners, who were developers, but didn't just look at the dollars. They looked at their community. And what came from it, I mean, to me, the Main Street Market, the businesses that are there, Albemarle Baking. I used to work I did some marketing for Ciboulette when it was sort of this cheese shop there that was competing somewhat with Feast. But that it gave a possibility there for something else. Yeah. Something else that today is an institution that like...
Orzo.
Yeah.
Feast.
Absolutely.
Lauren Gerner at one time had Sustain, the clothing store in that market. Was it the seafood joint?
Right.
Was it West Main Seafood?
Right. There was a butcher in there.
All
those
the Arsenal
kind of stuff.
family. Yeah, it was. I mean, the Market Street Market, and Erin King, I believe, is watching the program. She works at Feast. She's a key player at Feast. That building in its peak, in its heyday, was the spot. It was the spot of energy, so much positive energy. Charlottesville better today than when you lived here? Is Charlottesville better today than when you first moved here?
Better. It's different.
So different, right?
I think the possibilities are different. But I'm always excited by possibilities because possibility is opportunity. And it is an opportunity to make $1 or whatever. Yeah. It's opportunity to live better. Because if you kind of look at all of the possible outcomes, have we chosen the best one?
Have we?
I don't know. I think that there are possibilities that we have not chosen, that we've left on the table, that I think can be built upon. And that was somewhat like when we did a design competition for the bridge when it came through. The brief story on that was they were going to replace the bridge, essentially with the bridge. And they had all these charrettes and stuff, and people were like, yeah, we could do this and that. And at the end, they were like, well, here's the design, and it looked exactly like the old bridge. We're like, what was the point of all this imaginative work? Well, that was just impractical, and we're just going to build the bridge. Turned out that bridge was possibly, according to an architectural historian over at UVA, a mistake, because they thought a highway was going to come through Charlottesville and it was going to join up. It was 4 lanes, and that's why it goes from 4, it was like 2 lanes into 4 lanes and then back into 2 lanes. Why? You looked at it on Google Maps. Because it was an anticipation of a future that didn't manifest, thank God, because it was all about suburban flight. You know, you get out of the city, who wants to be there?
Yeah.
So the notion
They
was...
call that white flight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the notion was, to me, let's have a design competition, and UVA took this on, their architecture school, and some other people. We got 36 new possibilities. And the funniest one was that the one that won in all the voting rounds, there was a public voting and a UVA group and a stakeholders group. They all voted for something that nobody had considered, and that was an at-grade crossing. And they're, well, people will die. There are at-grade crossings everywhere. But it was like, remove the bridge. So the solution for the bridge is no bridge, maybe. But part of it, too, is foresight, because you've got a railroad that goes through there with coal trains coming from West Virginia, or going to West Virginia, that are empty, 100-car ones, and you have to accommodate for that. Well, guess what? Coal's dead.
Yeah, right.
So what's your 20-year solution? So for me, now we have different issues than we had 20 years ago. So what are the opportunities now in Charlottesville? How do Charlottesville people want to live now? Do you want to go to the farmer's market for your food? Do you want to support mom and pops? Do you want whatever? You can make a choice today. And to me, that's where the opportunity is right now.
I love what you're saying here. And this guy, I love this guy here. So
I get Doug. Too much.
Reed's on Preston Avenue recently had to do a GoFundMe. And they raised $20-some thousand for them to stock their shelves. What's happened in Charlottesville, from my standpoint, been here 24 plus years now, is we've had such a population shift where we've had folks that have had ties to Charlottesville, probably through UVA, move to Charlottesville and the urban ring with a lot of wealth. We've seen that with the HUD family median household income in our area now at $124,200. That was the 2023 numbers that were recently released. It's going up every year. It's going to go up again in 2024. So as the population shifts, as people come to the area because they had a fantastic time at UVA or they're being hired by UVA, they don't have the same emotional attachment to institutions that we have otherwise cherished and supported for so long. Reed's is a microcosm of this. Reed's is the neighborhood grocery store. And the owners of Reed's have said the neighborhood has changed. Now 10th and Page, Rose Hill, the surrounding neighborhoods, they're Instacarting, they're Whole Food delivering, they're Amazon delivering, or they're going to Wegmans, or they're going to Teeter, whatever it may be, and they're fancy cars, and they're not walking to Reed's like they once did. She's like, we don't have the foot traffic anymore. We had to lay off our staff, and we can't keep our shelves stocked. I went into Reed's the other day, still the shelves are pretty barren. Still the shelves are pretty barren. And I guess that as a microcosm, as the community of how the community has shifted with its population, as new folks, and I'll throw it to you, as new folks move to the area with ties to UVA, but not real ties to Charlottesville, our institutions will suffer because the emotional attachment to support the institutions, even if that means paying more to support them, is going to, that attachment's going to erode. Anywhere you want to go on this?
Well, I think part of it is supporting your neighbor, that realize that somebody else's fortune is tied to your own. And that when you support a local mom and pop shop, Anderson's Carriage Food House.
Ted Anderson, love Ted.
Ted is my brother.
Yeah.
And he,
now on a tent in Ivy Road.
Go see Ted.
Go see Ted.
Please.
His kids are under that tent now doing the work.
Go buy some great fish from Ted today over on Ivy Road. Because Ted was that story of a family-owned business. They were forced out eventually by CVS over a long, protracted, like CVS wanted that space, and finally they got in there. But you know, where can you come in and bring your kids and see Uncle Ted, and he's going to say, oh, I know you love, you know, the salmon or whatever.
The soups.
Yeah. And you have a connection there as opposed to the faceless connection that you have at other places. Wegmans is big and has lots of stuff, and I'm sure does wonderful things in whatever they do, but it's a different experience than going to your local, to go to Mona Lisa Pasta and go see Jim and get your favorite, linguine cut just for you right there. And you might pay more for it, even to go into Martin's. I'm talking with Sean over there. We're going to go repaint some of the road over at Ix, and he's known me forever, so he's like, I'm going to help you out. So it's about helping each other. It's not about competing with one another. And I will come back to this theme over and over again because I think it's critical. I think it's the most important thing, is how we support each other. It's also how we look forward, and it's funny, one difference that has happened over this time, which I think is very significant, is the ice rink.
Oh, this is going to be good here.
So the ice rink, I don't ice skate, I never played hockey, whatever. I used to think it was kind of silly. It was like this weird thing. I'm in Virginia and there's an ice rink. But it was great. My kids skated there. I've been curling a couple of times, and I found it to be an interesting, very kind of offbeat way to spend your leisure time. It was replaced with the Code building, which in itself, architecturally interesting. It's providing offices, all that. But think of it ideologically. You've replaced pleasure, recreation, with more work. Kind of fetishized work in a certain way. Like, you don't even have to leave the place. You could probably take a shower in there and work out and whatever. But is that the future? More work, more sexy work? Or how about the time that you get to spend with your family at the rink? And I think that that is a fundamental ideological difference in how we plan cities, how we plan our lives. And I think that, like you're saying, the people who move here now don't know the legacy of it. But some of the people who help make decisions in the city, planning, etc., do. And we know better. Actually, I love Maurice Cox. He understood. He rode a bicycle.
I'll give some perspective for the viewers and listeners. Maurice Cox started as an NBC 29 sports broadcaster. Literally a sports personality.
No. That was the city planner.
Jones.
That was the city or the city manager.
Yeah.
Maurice Cox was the former mayor.
It's one and the same.
No. Different guy. Anyway,
I'm doing a quick Google search.
All right.
I want to make sure I'm right here. I'll stand corrected if I'm wrong. I may be mixing up names. You finish your thoughts.
But he was a guy who was a professor at the architecture school and understood city planning. I think he's the city planner of Pittsburgh now, or Detroit or somewhere. But he was working on really interesting ways to get a community to work and areas.
Right. You're right. I'm thinking of Maurice Jones.
Maurice Jones,
Yeah, you're right.
And he had ideas that were perhaps ahead of his time of how to unify spaces and how to make it so it's walkable and how to understand neighborhoods so that they are comprehensive. I was at the table a little bit when Friendship Court was sort of considering what it was going to become. And there were lots of great ideas that were thrown in, but their model for it, and I think that they're doing an interesting job with it and not displacing the people who are currently there. But when they were asking about, well, what model would you propose? And I said, a neighborhood. Belmont, like why does it have to be institutionalized necessarily? And that's where a neighborhood works. Like, if you get hurt, do you go to the doctor, or you go to your neighbor who's a nurse and who can bandage you up real quick? And it depends upon the severity of it. But the notion is, how does your neighborhood support you and your life and your family and your lifestyle, versus externalizing that into, is it on a shelf somewhere?
Well said. What do you think of, this is close to your heart here, Ix. What's happening with Ix here?
So Ix is going through a transition. This is its 10th anniversary. We've been doing it for 10 years, and I was its, executive director for a bit, and I changed my name to Wizard. I was the Wizard of Ix, just because I didn't like titles. Yeah. I sort of still am, in that I'm doing this event on Saturday called Love Fest. It's our 10th year anniversary, and basically the theme is gratitude. But I've been looking at it in its evolution. It came out of Burning Man. I mean, I was out there with the Kuttners and some other people, and we said, how do you bring some of this energy and imagination to Charlottesville? And there was an opportunity in sort of an empty warehouse. And it was seeing the magic of throwing some paint on the walls that all of a sudden people were thinking differently of it. And fast forward a little bit, I was on an airplane, United Airlines, and their Hemispheres magazine, you pull it off, you're like,
Yeah.
and in the middle of it is 3 days in Virginia. I'm like, okay, and the center spread is Charlottesville. And the first thing isn't go to Monticello or UVA, it's go to the farmer's market at Ix.
Really? That's awesome.
And to me, that says we did it.
There you go.
That through all this perseverance, and when I get into gratitude, it wasn't me, it wasn't any individual. It was the combined work, and that was what I learned from Burning Man, is that the party's the parking lot.
I love that.
It's what everybody brings to it themselves. That's what it ends up being. And every day it was a new mix of people and a new possibility. And to me, that's what it was all the time, still is. And going forward, people are like, well, what's it going to become? Oh, what is it today? Who's there today? What are they doing there? And what are the opportunities? And to me, possibility is infinite. And the motto there was always dream big. And it wasn't necessarily dream big in a size thing. It was a dream big and dream deep and dream impossible. And to me, again, with the city, what is the possibility of the city, given its capital, given its political will, given its organization? And is it matching up with what that topmost possibility is? And I don't think so, but we can always work towards it. And that's what Ix is doing right now in trying to be sustainable. One problem was its success.
Yeah.
It transformed a place that was largely vacant into a place that you can't get a parking space now. And the city, in changing how it assesses, all of a sudden started throwing a lot of tax burden on it that it had to make up for. And that all goes downhill. So it's like, okay, well, we inherited a lot of burden for that. So all of a sudden we couldn't do free events, or we had to change how we thought about how this place was going to work. But I think that every sort of obstacle is an opportunity. So how do we face COVID? Was an obstacle, but we kept it open during COVID by me going down with a bunch of other people and painting circles. Okay, this is how we're going to space ourselves. And yeah, I will be the guy telling you, wear your mask. I know you don't want to wear it, and I know maybe you don't even believe in masks, but just do it.
Yeah.
So that we can be here. We still had events. And I think that and like the downtown mall, the prescience of the people who planned that to say, now we have, all these eateries that can eat outside. So us thinking down the line, what is our plan? The bridge, is coal in our future? Think for the future, behave in the moment, but those behaviors in the moment, if they can rely on trust and gratitude, you go interesting places. And I stuck to my guns a lot of times at Ix of just like, okay, it isn't about the revenues, it's about trust and gratitude, and we will persevere. And we have, while a lot of other wonderful art institutions, the bridge just closed.
Right.
Long-standing, they lasted longer than Ix has. But how do you stay in it? How do you still provide that something, that possibility that nowhere else provides? That sort of is in like the ice rink versus a beautiful workspace. Ix provided, and people were like, I remember there was a list that the city put out of what are your priorities in the city. And there was like 1 to 12, and you couldn't repeat. So like whatever the last one. So of course people are going to say crime and education and streets and da-da-da. Art and culture is the last one. Because the last thing, it seems like, when you have time for it. For me, it's the first thing. It actually leads everything.
I want to throw this to Brian. So Mr. Higgins says, run for council, please. This guy would be perfect mayor. Judah's giving you some props on that as well. Roger Voisinay, watching the program. Roger's institutional in Charlottesville, much like Brian is. He said, Gabe Silverman gave us the space at the Mickey Building when we were starting live arts in the early 1980s. Gabe Silverman's given a startup space for a lot of folks, including this little outfit here. Mr. Neil Williamson pushes back a little bit on what you said about the ice park, and he says, so which generates more Charlottesville economic activity, code or the ice park, including tourism? We will offer a little color there. I think the point that Neil's making, the ice park did struggle to survive.
It definitely did.
Yeah,
It
did
definitely
struggle
did.
to survive, but it was a fantastic thing to do with your family when you came downtown. I got so much I want to cover with you in a limited time here. The Friends of Seville lobbying group, it's a nonprofit. It's basically taken over for the Downtown Business Owners Association. They recently launched a show on this network, the Downtown Spotlight, with Greer Achenbach, and she gave a presentation to City Council a handful of weeks ago, and she tracked data from a third party. This third party was able to track cell phone IPs. And from 2017 to 2023, foot traffic on the downtown mall is down 1 million unique IPs. A million unique IPs from 2017 to 2023. Downtown mall right now, folks talk about safety, the houselessness, aggressive panhandling, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anywhere you want to go on what you're seeing with downtown here. I'll add to this, and I'll stop talking. My wife and a lot of her friends, when it's girls' night and cocktail hour, they don't want to come downtown. They go elsewhere.
I think a lot of these, I travel a lot.
Yeah.
And I was just in Portland. Actually, we were talking about the street mandalas in Belmont. That came from Portland.
Okay.
Like almost every charrette I was ever in, like here, were like, oh, how about a pocket park? It was always like, let's look at Portland. I was in Portland, and Portland is struggling to recover from various things. In 2020, there was COVID. It was a big flashpoint for a lot of the protests. And it has it decriminalized drugs. It did a lot of things, and it is struggling. And people are like, oh, it's unsafe. I've heard people like, don't go there. It's unsafe.
Was it unsafe?
I didn't feel unsafe, but I'm a
You're a
tall
big
guy.
dude. Yeah.
And I can understand some of that security concern, but I think it will recover. I think Charlottesville will recover. I think a lot of places are struggling after COVID, after a lot of issues that do people think it's safe enough to come out? And the homelessness issue is one that's nationwide, by the way. When I did my documentary on it, I was in Denver, I was in Chicago, I was in Anchorage, Alaska. Look under any bridge. They're homeless people. They're not just the ones downtown. So I think that has to be dealt with, and I think the primary thing is low-income housing. I mean, there's mental health, there's substance abuse, there's all sorts of other stuff, but there just are not enough places for people to live.
How do you characterize the state of the most important 8 blocks in a 300,000 person region downtown right now? Because you've seen it in a lot of stages.
I love that the downtown mall never really sold out. It didn't become just a string of franchises. There are a few franchises down there, but there's not a McDonald's. There is one across the street. I
don't say that's on the mall.
And the coffee shops.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it was a place of vitality. And I think it's wild to walk down to the downtown mall and stop and realize this was a street. And now there are giant trees in the middle of it. It's almost an impossibility, but a lot of places are going to that. I was just in Montreal. A lot of their streets, they're just putting barricades at the end of them and making them public streets. I think it will survive. I do think that I wish that they would put benches back on the mall. The same mall that was made by the same guy in Burlington, Vermont. Lots of benches, a lot of public seating. I know that homeless people sit on it, but other people have to as well. So what encourages people to come there? I think activating it somewhat definitely does. Things like TomTom, whatever, that bring people together. One little side thing, I was mentioning I travel a lot. One of the places I traveled to was a group of islands in the South Pacific called Vanuatu. Many people have never heard of this. Somebody told me I was in Fiji or whatever in some villages, and they're like, oh, you like this? Go to Vanuatu. Vanuatu comes up on these metrics often of being the happiest place on the planet. There are blue zones or whatever for longevity. This is often the happiest place on the planet. So I would ask the people there, why? I would ask, cab drivers and whoever I was staying with, shop owners, they all had the same answer. 2 words: coming together. It wasn't about economics. It wasn't about this place was like loaded with fruit and whatever. It was coming together, the unity of a place. And to me, the future of the downtown mall is about coming together. It's about Fridays after 5. It's about all the institutions that keep people coming together and supporting those businesses that are there so they stay there and they don't have to sell out necessarily to a franchise and that feastless experience. I think that the Landmark Hotel, I don't know why it has not been
John
resolved.
Dewberry's
But
nightmare.
yeah, and that it's a dead spot. But I think that some of this will come around. I think that I'm big into the music scene. I love that is one thing in all my travels. Charlottesville has music. And if you have not experienced the music in Charlottesville, you are missing out on one of the real reasons to be here. So whether it's Miller's on a certain night with John Dirth playing, jazz. Fellini's, unfortunately, is not still in action, but that was a place where you could have like this almost intimate thing with Joe Lawler playing here and but the music that's here in all of its tiers, having the Pavilion is just like mind-blowing. I could go see David Byrne, at the Pavilion, or the Decemberists or whoever, or the Jefferson or the Southern, all these great institutions. Ix used to be vying for the events, but we don't do that so much anymore. But to me, that's a place to come together, and it is. And what was the change at Ix, which is interesting, is that it became safe when people came there.
Right.
When it's empty, it feels unsafe. Mm-hmm. So just activity, people coming together is your security system.
Yeah.
So for me, what is the security? Well, come on out. If as soon as people get over that fear, and I don't know how that fits within my collaboration and competition thing, but if people get over the fear, they will be there, and all of a sudden it will be safe. Yeah. It's magic how that works.
Maybe it's some marketing.
That's how it worked at Ix. That's how it will work on the downtown mall.
I'll throw last question, and then you go anywhere you want here. We got about, and Aaron King is watching. We love you, Aaron. You got a lot of people watching here. Has UVA been a good steward of Charlottesville?
I think that they're a good player. I think that UVA, I think there was some statistic that Charlottesville has per capita like more book readers or something like that than anywhere else. I love the fact that Daedalus, by the way, just sort of has a renaissance and go buy a book.
Now owned by Jackson Landers.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. But there is a certain intelligence. I went to school in a college where it was very, the townies were very distinct from the university. I find here that there's a lot more mixing. I find that the people who work at UVA also are who participate in everything else. I think having the Virginia Film Festival is a huge part of that. How it interacts with the community is pretty good. I think it could be better. I think that, I don't know, like where I went to school in New Haven, you always kind of went like, okay, there's this like ivory tower in the middle of, and especially when I was there in the late 80s, it was dangerous. You didn't go off campus. And why didn't the university impact that more over its history of being there? I think that UVA and its capital and its, influence in the city could be better. I don't know what they're doing now, but I've often found that I like the interaction there. I mean, you were talking about Darden. I mean, having like such esteemed universities and possibilities for education here, like where do you get that opportunity? So there's so much here: music, education, a thriving community, an agricultural community. Like, wow, what a great place to live.
I love it. We'll close with this. I'd be remiss not to offer just an open mic for commentary on anywhere you want to go.
Well, I want to see people to come together this Saturday at Ix, and I want you to bring your freak. I want you to come and bring your gratitude. It's a celebration of gratitude. And there will be bands there, there'll be food trucks, there'll be acrobats, there'll be fire dancers. Come and celebrate it, because again, what is it going to be in the future? Well, it depends on how you participate in it. And I would say that is your whole day. I don't know, today go buy the coffee for the person behind you at one of our great coffee shops, whatever. Interact in your community. Because there's another project I work on about serendipity. Serendipity is when you get something that you didn't even know you needed. And it could be sitting right next to you. Talk to the person next to you. Connect to the people. Connect to your neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that's where the future is.
Brian, you were interviewer's joy. We got to have you back on. Where the travel's going to take you next?
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica, when are you leaving?
In about a week and a half.
Fantastic, good for you.
Yeah.
He's,
But I'll be back. Maybe I'll be back for the film festival. Who knows?
Please reach out.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you on.
Wonderful. Thank
Brian
you.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian is fantastic, guys. Thank you, Brian. If you can go one shot with me, we'll dot the I's and cross the T's on a couple stories, then offer some guidance there, Judah, to Brian with the show. I have 2 other topics that I want to get to today on the program that we kind of tease. Feast, thank you, Aaron, for letting us know this, is opening a new location, guys, on the UVA, the grounds of Thomas Jefferson's University. Feast Cafe and Market, opening a new location. Peace, Brian, good to see you. And at the Garden Room on the grounds of UVA at 211 McCormick Road. The new location, called Feast at the Garden Room, is an exclusive dining facility for the university's professional staff, faculty, and members of the Colonnade Club. Feast will provide delicious made-to-order sandwiches, soups, and salads, as well as grab-and-go offerings at 211 McCormick Road in the Garden Room. Elizabeth Pelly, the owner of Feast, is thrilled to be expanding her presence and Feast presence in Charlottesville. Congratulations to Feast. Also, one other item of the notebook, Grit Coffee is leaving its York Place location as you're rotating lower thirds there, and Grit Coffee is heading to the old Waterbird Spirits spot on Water Street. Hunter Craig owns that Waterbird Spirits former location. Waterbird Spirits purchased by Gallo, in a pretty significant deal. I don't want to release those monetary details, but we're talking, I'll say 8 figures plus. How's that for Waterbird Spirits and its deal and its acquisition? Grit moving to the old Waterbirds location on Water Street. So that's a pretty big deal, because that's going to leave that York Place storefront vacant, its most prominent one. The other storefront in the downtown mall, now home to the Marco and Luca dumpling shop. We'll see how York Property Management and the Lewis family handles that. Brian was awesome. Judah, I'm Jerry. It's the I Love Seville show. It's presented by Mexicali Restaurant in the old World of Beer location. It's presented by Pro Renata Brewery, expanding all over the Commonwealth. Dr. John Shabe, from dentist to beer baron. And it's presented by Charlottesville Business Brokers online at charlottesvillebusinessbrokers.com. Brokering business acquisitions and sales left and right. We are at Charlottesville Business Brokers. Thank you kindly for joining us on the Thursday edition of the I Love Seville show. So long, everybody.